Good afternoon, everybody. Hello there. To introduce myself, I'm a registered pharmacist by training, and I have my research background in oncology from the Kingston University in the UK. And today I'm going to talk about the business model that we have started, which is AUM Biosciences. Just to give you some perspective on oncology in Asia, 60% of the cancer cases come from Asia, of which it is expected by 2030, 14 million patients are going to be in Asia alone for cancer. But the challenging thing is only 20% of the globally approved drugs are available in Asia. And what that is doing is it's creating a $60 billion market in Asia alone, which is expected to be a $100 billion market by 2022. However, the current challenge is that oftentimes oncology drugs, which have very high potential, get uncovered, and they actually don't see the light of the day for multiple reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with science, but more to do with commercial and strategic reasons within the pharma company. And what that does, it creates a very big gap for patients in Asia, and the standardization of care is very different in Asia versus the West. What we started, and in our background, is we have done the virtual drug development models before. And this is where we started AUM. We acquire the global licensing rights and the manufacturing and development rights, and we enter into win-win arrangements with our partners and with milestones linked to the success of the drug. And at the end of the day, we conduct the clinical trials for those drugs, and we create a de-risked portfolio of oncology drugs in our pipeline. When we reach to that stage, that is the time we monetize it. Now, we are on a mission of making affordable cancer therapies. And while doing that, it is very important that we do it in a very holistic way. Not just focusing on individual things, but combining it all together by starting with small molecules in oncology, application of precision medicine, and combining digital health, combining it all together to reach to a point where we are looking at a more holistic way of oncology drug development versus a standard of what was done before. Now, an average standard for an approval, for a likelihood of approval for a phase 1-2 study, this is the industry standard, is 55%. But just by the fact of adding the precision medicine and the digital health aspect, you are improving the probability of success to 75%. And putting that in economic perspective, you are $1.5 million in revenue every single day for a new oncology drug. Where are we now? We were founded in April 2018. We closed a seed funding round of 2 million Singapore dollars, which is 1.5 million friends and family round. We are at a late stage negotiation of a term sheet of a couple of assets. And in 3 years' time, we intend to be a revenue generating company with a $75 million raise between Series A and B. And that's where we want to be. So that's in general about AUM Biosciences, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great. Good segue into our Q&A. So please, 3 minutes for questions.
Can you dig a little deeper into your business model? Because obviously I don't know much about biotech, but I do know it's a very, very expensive process to go through and get your drugs approved by various governments and then onto the market.
So you read it correctly. It's a very highly regulated market, and that's where our backgrounds of my and my co-founder would come into picture. So the business model, the way it would work is, oftentimes pharma companies, they would have a lot of assets in their pipeline, but they do not have the resources to develop all of them. So what happens is they actually take a lot of assets and put it on the shelf. And they are sitting on the shelf collecting dust. But again, these are very, very scientifically superior drugs. So just because they don't want to develop it does not mean they should not go to the Asian patients or global patients. So this is where we come into picture, is we speak to these pharma companies. Because they're anyways going to shelve it, we do not pay anything upfront, but we have a milestone payment related association with them. As the drug progresses into the different phases of clinical trials, we pay them the milestones associated with the drug development as well. So this is how we would work in terms of acquiring the assets, developing it, and then monetizing it. Does that answer your question? Yeah?
I want to build a little bit on Ted's questions. So I think you got it right. This is a very capital-intensive industry, and it's no small thing to run a clinical trial, even if you're doing it in a jurisdiction other than the U.S.
Yeah.
How much? What do those milestone payments look like? What do you really think your capital needs are going to look like?
So, a brilliant question, by the way. So typically, if you were to do a phase 1 study in the US, before I actually answer that question, the idea behind having this Asian biotech company is to utilizing Asian commercial innovation platform to allow that drug to be globally approved. Now, it is very capital intensive, you're right. However, if you were to do a phase 1 study in the US, it would cost anywhere between $4 to $5 million. But if you do the same phase 1 study in Asia, it is still accepted in the US FDA regulation. It is still accepted in EMA regulation. But you can do the same phase 1 study in close to $1.5 to $1.6 million. What you are doing with that is you are spending half of the money that you would spend in the US or Europe. You are still getting the approvals that you would potentially get by doing the same study in Asia. You are increasing the ROI, and you are ultimately improving the access of medicine by doing the trials faster. So it's a win-win situation for everybody. You are building the value in a much bigger way that someone in the US or Europe would be able to do it by capitalizing on the fact that Asian population is so hungry. There's a lot of patients in Asia. So does that answer your question? Great, thank you.
Okay, any last questions? Go for it.
So I'm wondering about the winner's curse problem, right? Where the drugs that are sitting on the shelf, really are they, just there are really a lot of diamonds in the rough sitting in there that, or is it, and how do you actually determine that, right? Because why would the company want to tell you all their, because maybe they're putting on a shelf for next year when they get more budget to go and do this.
So until now, our background, my background is from the clinical trial industry, and I come from a pharma background. And my chief medical officer, he's a board-certified oncologist with the US, in the US, and he used to be the chairman of the National Institute of Health Study Business Section Review. So we feel confident from that perspective that we have seen enough, if I may use the word, someone's garbage is our gold. Right? And to answer your question, how do we identify whether those drugs are really top-notch and high quality? The only way I can answer that is 2 ways. First is science. If you know the science well, that's how you can identify whether the mechanism of action and the targets that you are identifying from an oncology perspective, they work or not. And the second is the due diligence process. We have an intense due diligence process which could take anywhere between 8 to 12 weeks. Before we even come to a point where we tell the partner that we are trying to get the asset from that we like your asset. So at this point of time, since we started in April, we have analyzed close to 52 assets. And first, what you do is you crunch it from your previous background. If you really like it, go to stage 2 and stage 3. And then after that, we have actually made term sheet offers to 2 of them. So we have reviewed 52. And there is a distillation rate from 52 to 2. And we are still not sure whether we would go ahead with those 2 assets because there are multiple aspects to it, except just the science. There are commercial aspects to it and the IP aspects to it associated with it. So it's a very intense due diligence process. It's something which we are very, very aware of. Yes.
Let's wrap it here. Okay, thank you very much to AUM.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So.